Hello, and greetings from the Mirror Zone. I am Bryce Skidmore.
And I am David Leskin.
And it just feels like it's been ages since we've met.
Yeah, it's been literally time.
It's been a cigarette.
It's been one whole cigarette's worth of time.
But we're back to talk about our last and final installment of our Japanese science fiction episodes. This one on Tetsu Yano's The Legend of the Paper Spaceship.
Why don't we start by talking a little bit about Tetsu Yano?
Let's do.
Tetsu Yano is actually it's a writer's name, it's a pen name, for Osamu Sakata. And Tetsu Yano was born October 5th, 1923, and died October 13th, 2004. He was a Japanese science fiction translator and writer. He began to introduce Japanese readers to the works of U.S. science fiction writers in the late 1940s. He was the first Japanese writer of the genre to visit the United States in 1953. He took part in founding Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of Japan, SFWJ, in 1963, and served as its president from 1978 to 1979. Yano was born in Matsuyama, Ehime Prefecture, and grew up in Kobe. After studying at Chuo University for 3 years, he was drafted into the Imperial Japanese Army, serving 2 years and 2 months. After the war, he made a living collecting trash on a U.S. military base, where he became fascinated with the colorfully illustrated science fiction works thrown away by the soldiers.
Dude.
Yeah. He learned to read English and eventually began translating science fiction, including the works of Robert Heinlein, Frederick Pohl, Desmond Bagley, and Frank Herbert. He actually did 360 translations.
Damn.
Yeah, it's a lot. He later made a name for himself by translating the American novels which had inspired him to become a writer, including Dune and Starship Troopers.
Dude.
Yeah, pretty legendary.
Actually, and that's a thing where it's like if I ever go to Japan, I think I'm going to try and keep a lookout for one of his Japanese translations. I can't read Japanese, but
it would be really nice to own one.
I just like that cool shit,
Yeah, I love the idea that going into his own works, that those were his inspirations. You know what I mean? That's what brought him into science fiction.
No, and actually, we were having a conversation about this, and we'll come back into it at the end. But knowing that he was the first Japanese translator for Dune,
it's pretty epic.
It makes sense for this story too.
It definitely makes sense for this story. You can see exactly where a lot of these ideas probably had their seeds.
Yeah, and it's I also love the Heinlein too.
You can definitely also see, and you'll see as we talk about this a little bit more, but there's some definite Heinlein influence in this.
Fuck yes.
He wrote stories of his own, including The Legend of the Paper Spaceship, which first appeared in English translation in 1984, and has appeared in several collections, including the one that we read. And some of his stories have actually been adapted into anime. Maybe we'll go through one of those in the future if we can find them. I found a few, but we might want to pick the theme and maybe put them together with another one.
That actually, I think that'd be a couple of fun minisodes where it's we should do Black Sun and we should do one of his animes.
That would be great. Yes, I think that those would go well together. So look for that for a future episode.
Fuck yes.
Sadly, Yano died on October 13th, 2004 from cancer of the large intestine. Although he made a partial recovery after an operation in November of the previous year, he relapsed. His funeral was held on October 16th, 2004.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace.
So it goes.
So it goes. You want to get into it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the story, The Legend of the Paper Spaceship, I'm going to level with you. It's structured in a very odd way. It's very artistic. It's very focused on aspect, and it moves a lot between sort of different voices. So I'm going to do my best to tell sort of an overarching story, because a lot of it does read in a way like a fairy tale.
Yeah, and we'll get a little bit into some of those framing devices that differentiate between there's a narrator telling the story and the story is being told by characters within the story as well.
Exactly. So we have this, we have an odd voice that takes place during the war.
Halfway through the Pacific War.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this voice that comes in at the beginning, at the end, and sometimes intermittently in italics.
Yes.
But you have that voice, and then from there it goes into, this voice from the beginning tells us, now long years later, I cannot shake the feeling that what she was always holding out of paper stood for no earthly airplane, but for a spaceship, sometime long ago, deep in those mountain recesses.
Right.
So the she that they're talking about is a woman named Asen. And before we're really introduced to Asen, we learn about the woman who runs through the wilderness naked, chasing paper airplanes that never seem to fall. Where they see her most of the time is this place near her home called Endworld Mirror, which is this place where the way that it's described is it seems like a place where people go to commit suicide. Like it's always shrouded in this weird mist, and if you get close enough, you see this naked woman who's sort of like singing songs to herself and chasing a paper airplane. Her house is located near the mirror, or what's left of her house, and she is the last descendant of like the great family that lived in that house.
Yes.
But since her family has died in some traumatic way, and she has become essentially like an invalid, like she wanders around the town and is sometimes clothed and she sings like Ophelia from Hamlet.
Yeah, and the story comments about how the feeling is that of, to see this great family be brought so low that this is the last remnant.
Yeah, and it gets even worse too, because it's like because she is touched the way that she is. Unfortunately, like a lot of the men of the village, they sexually assault her.
Yeah, the way they describe it is that although her mind is fractured, her youthful beauty is almost permanent. It's immortal. Yeah. It's beyond time.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and they describe it. It's like even though she's like she should be like in her late 40s, she still looks like she couldn't be more than 20.
Yeah, and the response by the village, it's just to look at it dispassionately. Even it's pretty horrifying what they actually use her for.
Yeah, no, the men, they use her for sex, and the women do nothing but like bitch about her. There was this one moment, all the women in the village got together, and one of them said that she had a vision that the only way to cure Osen of her madness is to dip her in this cold well in the middle of winter. And when they do that, she like almost dies of hypothermia, and then we find out that the woman who proposed that whole thing was just drunk, like after a ceremony. But that woman, we don't know how or why, ended up walking herself into Endworld Mirror.
The place for the spirits.
Yeah.
Yep. And we start to see this as a pattern. It's definitely not the only character that ends up walking into it.
No. So as the story goes on, we find out that Osen becomes pregnant. The women of the village are like irate about this. They get together. They're like, we have to take you to get an abortion. There's no way you can take care of your own child. And she's very defiant about the fact that she will have a child.
It's the only time she really even speaks to them other than doing her nursery songs.
Yeah, it's the only time she gets cogent, like with them, and it's just like, no, I'm not having an abortion. So
you're not taking Iman from me.
Exactly, yeah. So she has her baby, who she names Iman, even though I can't remember what it was. We'll go to it when we get back into quotes, but the name that they wanted for the boy was the name for Common, because like his mother was like passed around by so many men in the village that it's like, ooh, Common, that's funny. And she's like, no, I'm going to name my boy the name I wanted.
Yeah, and just to clarify, as it's not horrible enough, it's not just the men in the village. Let's specifically say she's also considered a rite of passage for the younger men who haven't even had sex yet. There's a whole culture that's built up around this.
Around mistreating this woman.
Yes. And so her being able to name her child is pretty much the only agency that she ever gets, other than choosing not to wear clothes in the summer. Yeah.
No, and of course, like, after her child is born, her child is a boy, is promptly taken away and raised by a guy in the general store. He's sort of like an observant child. At first they think that he's crazy like his mom because he never speaks. And then eventually they realize that not only does he speak, but he's like...
super aware.
He's super aware and super eloquent. And in fact, he can read minds. He can look into people's thoughts and see what they're thinking, and the thoughts come to him. It's not like in the movies where like you hear thoughts. It's like he perceives their thoughts. Like it's pretty next level.
They describe it as almost like kaleidoscopic shapes and visions scattering through his head.
Oh, dude, I love that bit. No, and he like hangs out outside this hangout for like the youth, which eventually becomes a night spot for some fornications, like in the village. It's run by an ex-madam from Metropolis, it says. And he hangs around, but he just observes. But the whole while he's getting more and more acquainted with what exactly humanity in this village is all about. And they seem to be like really into sex. Like they seem to be like really sensuous and like kind of absurdly so. To the point where they see the boy like hanging around Take's, which is the spot, and they're like, well, you know who his mother is. She's just a harlot. If you have him hanging around and looking at this, I tell you, he'll be on all the women, and then where will we be? It's just so fucking offensive.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, but we'll make him go live with like the spinster teacher. So he moves in with her, and she's like a really wonderful, good woman. But like because he can read thoughts, he can read that she's sexually frustrated and horny every night.
Yeah, which is not great for him.
No. Because it's like, and this is the thing that's the most fucked up, is like what his teacher, what's her name?
Mrs. Yoshimura?
Yeah, Miss Yoshimura, the school teacher, has this one recurring fantasy that, of course, the boy can hear, and the fantasy is being the boy's mother. Like, being like the woman who gets taken advantage of by all the village people. And it's like, that's really kind of fucked up. Like, I feel bad for Iman, like, where it's like even that figure that's taking over his mother's position is like... And it's like, and it sucks too, because it's like she's keeping it inside. It's not like she's broadcasting this. She doesn't know anyone can hear it.
No, it's not much worse for him because he really has no one to talk with about any of this or guide him through it. I mean, the only one he has, she can't tell him anything.
No, and it's like, and that's the thing too, where it's like he can read everyone else's thoughts, but when he tries to read his mom's thoughts, he doesn't get anything but mist.
Yep.
And it's a mist that's actually like, it's around the mott. The mist is like a very environmentally present thing in this story.
Right, it is omnipresent. It's on multiple layers of the story. It's in people's minds. It's actually physically there. It's pervasive in the actual feeling of the story. The mist is there definitely on multiple levels.
Exactly. So as time goes on, he tries to use this power that he has to glean more of his mother's story. So he'll meet everyone in the village, and he'll get snippets. And he learns some stuff, but not a lot. He learns that one night all of the family was killed horribly, and the only person left was her, sitting in a corner, like playing with a toy and like singing rhymes and like covered in blood. There is a thing where it's like a lot of the town are aware that something horrible happened in that house, but they're not really sure what it was.
Yep, and they're definitely not very sympathetic.
No. Later, he turns away a dude who's come to rape his mother. Like, he forcefully throws him out of his mother's house and sort of tries for, I guess, the last time to really understand where he came from and what he sees the moment that he saw his mother's life before she was kind of transcended, like, whatever she was before, was being embraced by this creature, or this man, surrounded by like an explosion. And it was, and then from there it's like, there's really nothing that he gets from his mom. And then later he gets this calling to go up into the mountains of something that's calling him not like any other voice.
Right.
So he does that, and the mother realizes that she'll never see her son again, so she goes out walking in the village naked, and some guy tries to sexually assault her, and for the first time she fights him off. Like, she was just passive until that point, but it's at that point she like shoves the guy off, and she calls him human filth and tells him to go off and die, and that man walks into Endworld Mirror and has met a similar fate to that woman from before.
Yep, and through all of this sort of timelessly between the soldier who's sort of semi-narrating the story and the nursery rhymes that are occasionally interspersed, we kind of finally realize that her son is going home, I think.
Yeah. And
that, she may pine for whatever she's missing for thousands of years, for however long it takes, but at least he got home.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I left off, is there's a lot of play with the nursery rhymes in this, and I left them off because they're all Japanese language.
It's highly contextual.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you should really read it to understand, but like they use in the songs that are sung, there are words that are replaceable. Like the word for one is a ship's hull.
Right.
Or one of the words for two is like machines. Like this. It's this weird thing where it's like these really weird like rhymes about sort of like giving up hope are actually about repairing a spaceship.
Right, and that's what's so great is as you hear the soldier sound it out, he's like, no, this doesn't mean broken bow of a boat. This means broken ship that fell from the sky.
Yeah. And
he's piecing this all together, and you're sort of receiving the clues from all these different narrative points until it finally clicks together.
So yeah, that is the plot of Paper Spaceship. It was really good. Do you have any thoughts, like, straight off before we go into quotes?
Yeah. Warnings to people who might have some problems reading about the rape, because there's just a lot of it. It's
pervasive in this story.
It is. And I mean, if I were to say this dispassionately, if there weren't the science fiction elements, it's almost like a psychosexual study of the town's. I don't know, of how they understand sexuality and what they act like. If there weren't these sort of very emotionally distressing elements to the story, it might almost be clinically interesting to see how this isolated town sort of treats sexuality in their mind, and the different ways that different people are treated based on how they're viewed sexually.
Yeah.
It almost has an element to it as well. But that's definitely what comes up, I think, is that the idea that this is a fairy tale, and there is a lot of that because of the nursery rhymes and sort of the fantastical elements to this, but it's very much what sticks out is the pure sexual violence and like the evil undercurrent of what man can do that's wrong. It definitely clashes with the fairy tale aesthetic of it. And I think that's what stuck out for me the most, is this is sort of, because of the elements that that Tetsu was pulling from, you know, the influence from a lot of these greats like Heinlein, you sort of get a mishmash of a lot of different science fiction and fantasy elements. And you have that mixed in with sort of stark, the human condition. I think that's what sticks out for me the most, is the way those clash.
No, I think, and I agree with you, like, I actually agree with you super, but to an extent. There's an aspect of this story to me where it's like, it's really weird that it's so persistently a fairy tale underneath all the trauma, where it's like, there almost seems to be like, it's almost like, I would almost say that innocence wasn't lost necessarily as a result of trauma.
Sure, the trauma is almost on top of, the trauma that we perceive in the story, you could say, is not as bad as the trauma that we don't really ever really see. Yeah. That we get pieces of that was somehow a billion times worse, and everything that comes after it is sort of like calm waves on a pool. It's almost nothing in comparison.
Yeah.
How about you?
Probably the thing that really stuck with me the most about this story is just having it done from the point of view of two people who are so outside.
Right.
There's something really illuminating about the story coming from the point of view of like two people who you would never listen to, and who, I mean, in the end are aliens. So there's this weird sort of like, and you know, they can, if they want to, inspire people to walk into their own deaths. So it kind of reminds me of that like old fairy tale, like, or like God's tales, sort of like Odin or Zeus show up to your house in disguise, and it's like you got to be nice to them or else some fucked up shit's gonna happen.
Right.
But it's like, that's this kind of fear that happened with me with this story, where it's like, you know, you treat these people like you treat any person you can mistreat, but you have no idea who they are or what they can do.
Yeah, you certainly don't realize you're going to be shouted at as being human filth when the bill finally comes to pay.
No, exactly. And I wonder about that shit too, like, was at the end of District 9, where the one prawn managed to get the ship working and flew up into space. Their weaponry still works.
Yep.
And you know what? I would totally fucking understand if they bombed Earth.
I would understand that too very easily.
I would not want it to happen, but like, honestly, when you treat living things like that, that's what you come to expect. And it did seem towards the end like both the mother and the son were kind of losing their patience with humanity.
Right, the mother was almost encouraging them up to a point to like still love them anyway. Mm. But there's only so far that will take you, considering their treatment.
Well, no, and it's like she encourages him to do that, but as soon as he leaves and she realizes she'll never see her son again, she goes walking around, and she, for the second time in the story, asserts her own will when she tells a man not to sexually assault her, and he doesn't listen, so she kills him.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, it seems like they both reach this moment where they have like lost the patience.
And we'll probably do this quote, but to underline kind of what you were just saying. Part of what happens there is that he gets fear in his eyes. Even before she makes him do that stuff with her mind, he can tell that she's there, and that not just that she's there, but that there's a white-hot will underneath that she could have used at any time, and it terrifies him. But then he comes out of it and tries to reassert his will on reality, and she's not having any of it.
Yeah, it was really good. Shall we get into quotes?
Let's do it. Do you mind if I start with the beginning quote, since we talked a little bit about the soldier?
No, please, let's do beginnings.
Halfway through the Pacific War, I was sent from my unit to a village in the heart of the mountains, and there I lived for some months. I still recall clearly the road leading into that village. And in the grove of bamboo trees beside the road, the endless flight of a paper airplane and a beautiful naked woman running after it. Now, long years later, I cannot shake the feeling that when she was always folding out of paper stood for no earthly airplane, before a spaceship, sometime long ago deep in those mountain recesses. That's the first one, and it really does a good job, I think, of establishing, especially because this is, like we said, these are the italicized portions, but having him give this instant explanation to us even before we actually find out the reality of the whole story, it's a really great way to let it unfold.
It is. Hey, I like that pun.
Huh.
Paper airplane.
No pun intended.
Unfold. No, I really like that, and it's actually like it's a trope that I kind of super enjoy. But like when a soldier is talking, it's like when I saw the shit, all I could think about was this one moment of like peaceful weirdness. And there's a lot of movies that start out that way that I enjoy.
Yeah, and it does a good job of evoking that feeling.
Yeah, I'm just gonna describe Enwold Mir.
Yes.
Enwold Mir, the Uva Iri no Numa. After they had laughed and danced through the promises and passions of living youth, old people once came often to this place to end misery of their old age by throwing themselves into the swamp's murky waters. Superstitions hold that Enwold Mir swims with the spirits of the dead. To placate any of the lingering dead, therefore, these valley folk had heaped numerous mounds of stones in a small open space near the mere. This place they named the Sai no Kawara, the earthly shore where the journey over the great waters begin. They gathered here once a year for memorial services, when they burnt incense and clapped hands and sent their prayers across the wide waters to the shore of the netherworld.
It's a really great description. And, talking of this sort of being a sci-fi fantasy, setting the elements for it being a fairy tale within that, we really start to build this idea of the old myths and the old world.
Yeah. No, it says, was it for the village children gave the mirror a wide berth. Round-licked and cover stones, rain-soaked rotting paper dolls, creaking wooden signs with mysterious indecipherable characters inscribed on them. For children, these things all bespoke the presence of ghosts and ogres and nightmare encounters with demons. So it's very much like a haunted wood.
It is. And of course we have the quote right after that, which is, "Sometimes, however, the children would unintentionally come close enough to glimpse the dank mirror, and on one such occasion they were chasing the madwoman Osen, who was flying a paper airplane. Say guys, Osen's still running around naked. Hey Osen, don't you want any clothes?" All the children jeered Osen. For adult and child alike, she is a handy plaything. But Osen had a toy too, a paper airplane as thin as sharp-pointed as a spear. So, I mean, we have that section before where you talk about this, like, haunted woods, and she's sort of the witch or the unearthly apparition that hangs at the end of it. But it doesn't seem like they have the same sort of reverence for her as they do for the place she lives.
Well, no, and this is and it's weird because I caught it the first one, but I didn't underline it, and it's it is such an unsettling description, but it's all the children jeered Osen. For adult and child alike, she is a handy plaything.
It's pretty creepy.
So the children fuck with her because she's crazy, and the men sexually assault her because she's crazy and won't fight back. Yep.
No matter what your needs are, she's perfect for them.
And it's it is interesting to describe her as that, sort of this force that's outside of nature, that lives essentially on the teetering edge of life and death, of nature and culture.
Yeah, and she is, even without knowing that she's an alien, she and her son are treated like others. And this story does a good job of separating the idea of what you would treat an alien like versus what you would treat someone who is alien or outside of the system. They do a good job of differentiating those definitions.
Yeah.
And still having them both be in the same story.
No, I totally agree. I'm going to read about Osen's body.
Do it.
Osen, whose body is ageless, steps lightly over the grass, reaches the mirror where the enfeebled old cast themselves away to die. The paper airplane flies on against the mist before her. No one knows what keeps the plane flying so long. Once Osen lets go of it, the airplane flies on seemingly forever. That's all there is to it. A mad woman is Osen, going about naked in summer, and in the winter wearing only a thin robe.
Yeah, it's such great imagery in this story in particular. You just have this sort of ageless, ghostly beauty wandering around naked, throwing these paper airplanes that seemingly never land. Mm-hmm. It builds up this really creepy and beautiful image in your mind.
It does. And it's one of those things that I was wondering about where I feel like the story kind of really grows up with you, where it's like it starts out very fairy tale like, and then you start getting to the sexual assaults, and then from then on, like, you know, you have to deal with school, and then in the end leaving home, so it gets very adult by the end. Like, and I feel like I'm starting to notice this catalyst starting here.
That's very interesting. So I mean, I really like that. It's almost the idea of, rather than going from like fairy tale to sci-fi alien story, we kind of have more this sort of idea of maturation. Like, you start the story reading simple descriptions and simple ideas, and then it sort of evolves with the reader as they kind of mature through the story into the real world implications of what you're reading.
Exactly, and it's not till later till they start unpacking the Japanese puns. So it's like you have to get to the point where you know, I guess, have command of language enough to decipher puns.
Right. I wish I could read this in the original translation.
Oh, me too.
I'm sure there's, even with this amazing English translation, I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff with wordplay that we're missing.
This is a hard bit. Osen, community property, harlot to all who came to her for it. The butt of a randy male superiority, coming to know the secrets of her body was a kind of rite of passage for all the young men of the village. Osen, the village idiot. This was the other reason why the villagers sheltered her. Osen was the only daughter and survivor of the village's most ancient family. Among those who lived deep in the mountains and still pay homage to the wolf god, the status of a household was regarded as supremely important. That such an imbecile should be the sole survivor of so exalted a household gave everyone a limitless sense of superiority. Osen, plaything for the village sports. Her house stood on a knoll, from where you could look down on Endworld Mar. Perhaps it was better to say her house was left rather than stood.
Yeah, boy, I mean, you really get the sense of how the villagers see her. It's community property first, harlot first, sexual conquest first, and then they sheltered her also because she couldn't even take care of herself. That's almost secondary, and they barely give her that. I mean, what she has is just left alone. It's not exactly kept up for her.
Yeah. No, and it's actually, and it's really fucked up to me, because it's like, I like to look for the perverse dark side of things, and I do believe there's a perverse dark side to charity.
Sure.
It means I can decide to save your life. Like, I can decide to be, like, cool to you, and you owe me, like, and, you know, basically you just owe me your life, you know, I'm just such a good person, but it's like, no, your investment in this woman is twofold, because it's like, and I also, that's, like, one of the things that fucks me up so much, is that it was the fact that she was the only surviving member of this house that was super respected, provoked in the community a sexual assault from all the men who realized that now she's been knocked down a peg or two, and then charity from their wives, who now get to say that that poor idiot from, like, the high house has fallen on hard times and they can feel superior themselves.
Yeah, seemingly everybody benefits from helping her except for her.
Yeah. No, it's like, and I also love that because it reminds me a little of that, like the beauty of the prose of the fall of the House of Usher, where it's like there's an indistinction between the house and the family, but it's like perhaps it's better to say the house was left rather than it stood.
Yeah, it's a really good way to put it. Once, when a shrill group of cackling old women gathered at the well to hold yearly memorial services and pray to the wolf god, one of them was suddenly stricken with a divination and proclaimed that if Osen were soaked in the well, her madness would abate. This cheered up all of those who envied Osen's great beauty. So on that day, 12 years ago, poor Osen was stripped to the raw before the eyes of the assembled women and dunked into the water-frigid well water. Winter. An hour later, her body blushed a livid purple. Osen fainted and was finally hauled out. Sadly, her idiocy was not cured. Story has in that the old crone who blurted the augury was drunk on the millet wine being served at the memorial service, and that afterward she fell into Endworld Mirror and drowned because of the wine. From then on, once someone undressed her, Osen stayed that way. If someone draped a robe over her, she kept it on. Since someone undressed her nearly every night and left her as she was in the morning, Osen most often went around naked. Beautiful as the men might find Osen's body, others thought it was best to keep the children from seeing her. Therefore, each morning a village woman came around to see that she was dressed. Osen stayed stone still when being dressed, though sometimes she smiled happily. She went on singing her songs. Folding one, da-dum. Fold a second one, ta-tum. A third one fold, trolla. Fly on, I say, fly. Fly ever on to my star. Folding her paper airplanes while she murmured and sang. And one day soon, to the stunned amazement of the villagers and eventual focus of their great uproar, Osen's stomach began growing larger. No one had ever stopped to think that Osen might someday be gotten with child.
Which, okay, first of all, fuck these people.
Fuck these people every way.
Oh, you didn't? You didn't think that might happen? You didn't?
Yeah, it's so interesting that in almost all the dealings with her actual well-being is almost second or even third consideration, if at all.
No, and it totally breaks my heart that it's like after she's dunked in the well in the middle of winter by these horrible drunk women who just want to shame her. Like, and she's just the poor girl who isn't even all there to begin with. So they dunk her, and then after that, it says from then on, when someone undressed her, she stayed undressed. She couldn't even be bothered to put clothes on. Like, and that, like, not, it was more like, what's the point? Like, there's an aspect of this where it's like, I know it sounds kind of fucked up, but I know that she is, like, sort of a beyond human. She definitely has a light in her that's like her son, and I feel like she definitely is extraterrestrial, but, like, that Dr. Manhattan level where it's just like, what the fuck does it matter if I put clothes on?
And that's the messed up thing.
Yeah.
It's like, and I hate to say this, but I think even her treatment of the treatment of her by them is almost, she doesn't even consider it anything. She's so beyond. She's transcended almost everything, but her mind is still barely there, and her body's still barely there.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's like it's so fucked up too, because it's like a woman would come by. It's like, oh, we don't want the children to see her naked. And it's like,
help this woman.
Yeah, you need to look at what your fucking society is doing to this woman, and not just you need to. And it's like when people freak out, where it's like, oh no, tits on television. That's wrong. You gotta cover that up. It's like you should really talk to your kids about how to treat women. Like,
yep. I mean, maybe explain to them a little bit rather than making it be on somebody else's fault. You know what I mean? It's pretty hard to read.
A boy was born, and they named him Amon. When he was nearly named Tomo, common, because Osen was passed around and around among the village men. The old midwife quickly intervened. As the baby was coming out, Osen cried, Amon. The woman reported, that's what she said. I wonder what she meant. And we find out later that that's a song. But
right.
I also love that immediately, like, just in terms of how horrible these people are, like, they deliver a baby. It's like, I know, you should call your kid Tomo, because it means common, because you had all the men in town. And it's like, can you just
like for a second give this woman some sort of fucking dignity for like a moment?
No.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine, but it's very well described, so it's not too hard to imagine.
She sings a song, Escape with the Amon who doesn't know, flow, flow, and grow old. All hopes dashed in this mountainous land, no fuel for the pilgrim's fires, no swinging heaven's way. Amon has died, alone, so alone, went up in longing for his distant home.
Yeah, some of these fairy tales, nursery rhymes, they're really melancholy. They're incredibly sad.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's a real echoing, especially when you find out that these are mistranslations from long ago messages about what actually happened in the situation. It's so sad that these are all sung as just like fun little kid songs.
Yeah.
Everyone so pitied Amon, but as he grew, he in no way acknowledged their gestures of concern, and because of this, everyone came to think the mother's madness circulated in her silent child's blood. Not so. When he was awake, Amon could hear everyone's voices, though they weren't voices in the usual sense. He heard them in his head, voices of vibration passing through the air, sounds spoken with a will. What Amon heard was always accompanied by shapes. When someone uttered the word mountain, the syllables mountain resounded in the air. The shape projected into Amon's mind with the word would differ depending on who spoke it, but always the hazy mirage of a mountain would appear. Listen as you will to the words, go to the mountain. It is possible to distinguish 5 syllables, but in young Amon's case, overlapping the sound waves, he could sense some one thing, a stirring, a motion that swept into a dim mountainous shape. For the tabula rasa mind of the infant, this is an enormous burden. Amon's tiny head was always filled with pain and tremendous commotion. The minds and voices of the people around him tangled like a kaleidoscopic shape scattering through his head, like voices and images on the screen of a continuously jammed television set. It is a miracle Amon did not go mad.
I love that.
I know. I love that too. It's like, we just keep getting more elements added to this story. We've got aliens, we've got haunted families and suicide rivers, and now we have psychic ability child. This child who was never wanted or asked for by anybody, but who his mother very lovingly named, and now who he's stuck with all of these horrible people's minds shattering into his own. That last part of that quote really got me. It's a miracle he did not go mad.
Yes.
I know I would have with this town's voices in my head.
You know, and it reminds me, have you ever, like, I've met people like that in my life where it's like, I just find out a little bit of some shit that they've gone through. I'm like, how are you talking to me right now and not in a padded cell or something?
Yep.
Like, not talking shit on people who can survive intense traumas. I admire it, and it's, it's that. Like,
It's exactly that. You can only just barely comprehend what they're able to stand, and only in the sense that you know that you probably wouldn't be able to handle the same thing.
Exactly. That was it. I love this, and it's a little bit after. It's like,
yes.
The Amon's mind was an unseen mirror reflecting what these men were really thinking. It differed only slightly with each man. So, not only do you get this, like, barrage of things coming at you in the same way, with all of their fucked up intentions and all of their shitty innuendos, and the thing that's saddest to me is that he only realizes that it differs slightly depending on what human you're talking to. Like, they each kind of have the same gross, lustful, like, mean thoughts.
Yeah, and like another sentence or so later, his first words are, "Why does everyone want to sleep with Osen?" he asked. Osen, he said, not mother.
Yeah.
Perhaps because he kept seeing things through the villager's mind. Amon was unable to know Osen as anything more than just a woman. That's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, it may have differed a little bit from man to man, but he doesn't even have the benefit of having his own impression of his mother. He sees her the way they see her, which is just, it's too awful for me almost to comprehend.
It's like, it should be fucking traumatizing.
Yeah, how could he have his own idea of identity, alone just from, like, everybody knows that he's this sort of ostracized, unwanted child, like, but to add on top of that he can hear what they're thinking about it, not even the stuff that they awfully say out loud, but what they really truly think, it's pretty gross. Not a power I feel very envious of, I'll say that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, go for it.
Amon's mind-reading powers intensified. Among them, as he roved over the thoughts night after night, he could see so clearly into their thoughts that it was like focusing on bright scenes in a collage. He was therefore all the more puzzled by his mother, Osen. She was different. Didn't the thoughts of a human being exist in the mind of an idiot? The thoughts of the villagers were like clouds drifting in the blue sky, but what they thought was so transparent. But in Osen's mind, thick white mist flowed always, hiding everything. No words, no shapes, just emotion, close to fear turning there. As Amon kept peering into the mist, he began to feel that Osen let the men take her, so that she might escape her fear. Amon gave up his search for his mother's mind, and returned to the days of his endless reading. So I think that's interesting, where it's like, when he sees, like, he tries so hard to get into his mother's mind, but when he comes to the understanding that she, like, allows herself to be repeatedly raped because it's, like, it's better than the trauma that left her this way.
Yeah, and she's sort of transcending the fear that she has.
Yeah. She accepts the rape because she accepts the fear of the now as opposed to the fear of whatever drove her here. Which is now terrifying. It is terrifying. It's now interesting that I think of the moment that she refuses it.
Right.
Like, and the only reason she would fear that or would refuse it in this rationalization would be as if in the end she got over that bigger fear.
Right.
Because I really just love this. It's at the beginning of section 6, but they say that time weathers memory away. In truth, the weight of years bears down on a memory, compressing it into a hard, jewel-like clarity. A mystery slept in that village, and sleeps there still. Over the years, my thoughts have annaled around these puzzling events, but the mystery will remain forever uncovered, unless I go there and investigate in earnest. I have tried to return many times. A year ago, I came to within 50 kilometers of the village, and then, for no rational reason I can summon up, I turned aside, went to another, more amiable place. Before embarking on these journeys, I am always overcome by an unshakable reluctance, almost as if I were under hypnotic compulsion to stay clear of the place.
Right? Which, it also makes me think that if this is taking place after her son has gone home, that may have been a turning point for her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this village may be impossible to get back to for people who don't live there anymore.
Yeah.
If there is people still left in that village. Like, who knows what could happen by then.
They bring up there are only 2 people who live in the village who are from outside of it.
Right.
Like, there's the woman who runs the cat house, and there's the teacher. And other than that, like, it seems weird. Like, it seems almost like It style, like, where, like, somehow collectively the village has gotten, like, this mind whammy put on them. Because, like, they they're really weird people. Like,
Yeah, overall, the picture that we get of these people, especially like almost in an isolationist kind of sense, is like it highlights the fairy tale aspect. It feels like another world.
No, it is. Yeah, it's far. It's a land far away, as it were.
From the place where the columns fell from the sky in fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
Towards the end, he confronts his mother. And this is one of my favorite bits, and it just sort of speaks to, like, when you feel misanthropic thoughts, and if anyone has a right to feel them, it's these people. But it's Amon talking to his mom. Amon was of the unswayable opinion that all villagers were obscene beyond the powers of any description, especially Osen and himself. They were the worst offenders. Though through the minds of the men, he was constantly privy to Osen's careless, wanton rut, and the pain that he was always Osen's child was heavy upon him. Ever she bared her body to the men, and Amon hated her. He hated the men who came to her, and in his superlative 9-year-old mind, this wretched emotion that transformed into seething hatred for all the human race. It was on one of his infrequent visits to his mother's that he last ventured his anger, and struck an approaching man with a hurled stone. "Drop dead, you little bastard," the man raged. "Don't you go making any trouble, if you know what's good for you. Who do you think's keeping you alive?" Amon returned to the parlor after that man left and gazed at his silent mother's dazzling naked body. He shook with unconcealed fury. "I want to kill him. I will kill him. Everybody." Osen reached out to him then. "My son, try to love them," she murmured. "You must, if you are to live." Stunned, Amon fell into her arms and clung to her. For the first time in his life, he wept, unable to control the flow of tears. And I think that's interesting, because it's like him and Osen, they only cry each once in the story.
Yep.
And that was his.
Yeah, the story almost only offers both of them single moments to actually be completely true to their pain and allow them to vent it. And I still find myself tearing up every time I read that scene. It's really emotional.
It is. No, and it's like, if you've ever been in a situation where it's like you're meeting a parent who you've been taken away from, where it's like, because that's the thing that I think is really fucked up about this story, is that she fought so hard to keep this child, and she doesn't even get to raise it.
No.
Like, and he gets passed around the town. But what's even more fucked up is this guy, the John, who shows up, and it's like,
who do you think's taking care of you?
And it's like, go fuck yourself. The only reason you take care of me is because you all, like, enjoy the repeated process of raping my mother. Like, it reminds me of that, just like the hatred in him. It's like, it reminds me of just like Rorschach hating men.
Absolutely. Rorschach hating men and Rorschach hating prostitutes or women that have any sex at all. He projects the anger from both of those things. And it's kind of a similar situation where it's just like the focus of all of that anger is standing right in front of him. And, of course he wants to kill him. Mm-hmm. Who wouldn't?
No, and I love that too, where it's like, and it's not, and that was not even in, that was what I was trying to say, is that's untagged. So it's like, it's not in quotation marks where it's like, I want to kill him, I will kill him. I think that the implication is Osen's reading his mind. Absolutely. As he's thinking that.
I think the same thing. I think it's definitely because of the parentheses, I think that's definitely a mind conversation that's happening.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's great, and I love that she and it's weird to me because it's like, it's so very, we were talking about this on the way over, it's so very enigmatic to me that he has that very, we would both agree, a sane reaction, it's understandable to be that upset about that situation, and then she reaches out and she says, "You must love them."
And she says it out loud.
She does. And it's like that is already such a weird thing for a rape victim to be saying. And I don't mean weird as in bad. I mean,
it's not what you would expect.
It's not what you would expect. And that she's the one telling him to steal his anger.
Other than the couple times when she loses control herself and gets people to kill themselves, it's an enormous amount of compassion on her part for her son to say that in that moment. I'm not going to necessarily say that it's compassion for them. It might be to some extent, but I feel like it's more directed at him. Yeah. She doesn't want this for him.
She doesn't. No, and speaking of that, do you mind if I read The Calling?
Do it.
Amon little cared to think deeply about the meaning of Osen's words, and he hated, and his hatred towards the human race still filled his heart, but now he visits his mother far more often. It was during one of these visits, as he sat on the porch beside Osen some days or weeks later, that Amon heard a strange voice. The voice did not come as sound in the air, or as a voice reaching into his mind with shapes and contexts. It was a calling, and it was for Aemon alone, a tauntless to drag him to its source, a thrown rope pulling, usually grabbed in a neat plain cotton robe. Ossen was staring down at the long valley, her mind empty as always. Who is it? Aemon called. Osen turned her head to watch Aemon as he scrambled to his feet and shouted the question. The vacuous expression on her face suddenly blanched, frozen for an instant in a look of dread. Where are you? Aemon shouted, as if pulled up by Aemon's voice. Osen got slowly to her feet and pointed to the mountains massed on the horizon. It's over there, she said. That way. Aemon hardly glanced at her as he started down the stone stairs, and then he was gone. He didn't even try to look back. Time frozen in yellow sunlight for the madwoman, and then melted again. Osen wandered blindly about, racked with sobs, at some point arriving at the small water-wheel shack that housed the village millstone. The violence of her weeping resounded against the boards. She may have lost her capacity for thought, but she could still feel the agony of this final parting from her only child. One of the villagers, catching sight of her trembling figure as he passed by, approaching her with a broad grin, reached for her body with calloused hands. Now, don't cry, Osen, he said. Here, you'll feel lots better. The look she fixed him with was so hard and venom-filled, the first of its like he had ever seen from her. For a moment, he felt a faint rousing of fear shake his heart, then slapped his work clothes with gusto and laughed at his own stupidity. Now what in the hell? And cursing Osen, he grabbed her to force her to the grassy earth. Osen slapped his hands away. Human filth, she shouted clearly, commandingly. Her words echoed and re-echoed in the stony hollows around the watermill. Be gone and die. As Aemon hurried off down the road, the witless villager walked placidly into Endworldmere, a dreamy look transfixing his face as he sank unknown beneath the dark and secret waters. In the bamboo grove, white mist danced again on the back of the air, and a white naked woman figure ran lightly, chasing a paper airplane that flew on forever.
At the Sai no Kawara, the earthly shore where children come to bewail the passing of those who have crossed over the great waters, there is a weather-beaten sign of wood inscribed with characters that can only be spottily read. It seems so easy to wait 1,000, nay 10,000 years, driven mad with longing for the star of my native home.
Fuck.
Yep. Yeah. So Aemon, he gets the calling, and his mother tells him what it is, and knows that this is saying goodbye to her child, and for whatever reason, she's not going back.
I don't understand that piece of it. Like, why she doesn't go with him. Or, like, why the calling's only for him.
Yeah, I mean, that may be the mystery of it, right? Like, I don't know. I have a lot of theories. Whatever. It seems like if she hadn't been emotionally broken by the whole experience, that maybe she could have gone back at any time. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, maybe her people or her planet only finally sensed him, or whatever's in the ship that responds to psychic signals. There's a lot of ways it could go. But ultimately, I think that the mist and she are tied to this place. Mm-hmm. And maybe she can't leave.
I think you might be right.
In one way or the other. If it's her, or if she's imposed this on herself, in one way or another, the calling was meant for him.
Yeah.
Not for her.
No, and it's like, I wonder if it's like, if there's just, I think you might be right, where it's like, maybe it's just too broken.
Yeah. For whatever reason, whether she chose to do this to herself, or it's her own choice in response to what actually happened. Either way, it does seem like it was not, in the end, meant for her to ever leave. And that may be why she's in the place that she's in right now. And why she says you have to love them. Because to her, maybe she can't leave this place.
Yeah. No, that's actually kind of crazy to think about it in that term of being like, sort of a constant exile. Or like being exiled and...
Yeah, and we'll never know whether it's self-imposed or not. Because, the crash is one thing, but... It sounds like she should have been able to just go to her spaceship and leave, mm-hmm. if what we're understanding is correct. And we'll never know really what happened to Aemon. We don't have this thing about and as the villager stepped coldly into the water, there was a blast from overhead or something. We don't get anything. Aemon just leaves the story and his mother.
No, and for a spaceship that's we don't know if it works. We know it's broken, and we know that there's there could maybe be code in the weird regional children's rhymes that can help them fix it.
Right.
But that's also still a question for not right now.
Right, and ultimately this does end like a fairy tale, which I really like. It's just sort of the mystical elements go back from whence they came, and the ghosts go back to haunting the woods, and the soldier can never get back in.
No, and this is a thing that like I feel like there is sort of an odd pushing forward though that does happen at the end of it, because it's like, you know, the with Emerald Mirror and the spaceship up in the mountain and the thick mist and it being sort of this weird like suicidal place.
Yes.
Like it seems like a place that's sort of like wrought with tragedy and death, and a death that we're all sort of like marching towards. They are these kind of creatures that live on a weird like metaphysical fringe.
Right.
But the thing that I find super interesting is after a point, like these two characters, the son physically, I guess, and the mother, like in terms of her own body, sort of like assert a new boundary. Like he hears the calling and is going to the spaceship, and what I find interesting is after she loses her son, the woman who couldn't be bothered to like put clothes on, like who was just so beyond that she wouldn't even slap away someone who was trying to sexually assault her, gets to the point where after she's parted with her son, she actually is so distraught, so irate. Not only will it's the first time she says no to being sexually assaulted, like that she fights it,
right,
and then kills the man who tried to do it.
I like to think this is the last time that happens.
I like to think so too. I like to think that every man who tries to give Osen a hard time after this is going to have a nasty fucking surprise.
Yep, or end up in the mirror at the very least.
Yeah, no, and it's like, and there's a part of me that's like that kind of sees that aspect of it as a happy ending, where it's like
it might be,
and it's maybe like she sort of, when she saw like what her victimization had done to her son, or like what like the sort of the trauma that they had both accrued, that I feel like now she's dealing with.
Right.
Like now she's not letting the trauma make her inactive.
You might even go so far as to say that the fog was caused by her and that she was blocking the calling from coming to her son.
I didn't even think of that. You're probably right.
It could be. I mean, you know, she may have been holding off those signals to return this whole time. You know, she wanted a son.
Because it's the same word. It's the mist that's used to describe the surrounding area is the same mist that's in her mind. Like,
it's just a speculation, but I think that maybe, as she said, she realized that this is what he needed, and that she couldn't allow the victimization to continue any further. But with that, she could not keep being the same person she was anymore.
Yeah.
With him gone, there was no reason for her to be, and I like to think that maybe both of their lives were improved after this. I hope so.
I mean, I feel like they've improved it for no other reason than they're not where they were.
From their own improvement.
Yeah.
Either way, whatever happens to them, I agree. I think that maybe they've grown.
No, and this really was, and actually, and I realized that too, where it's like these. I'm starting to see the link after we've sat down and talked them through more, but just this and Triceratops, where it's like they're very much based on a special understanding of reality between a parent and a child.
Boy, yeah. That's a really good connector. I hadn't thought of that either. I think that my initial readings of this, the loss was what was in my face so much before, and then, you know, on second reread, kind of the idea of finding or losing childhood innocence.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely seems much more like it's like growth with the journey of a parent and a child. I definitely think those are the heart of both the stories.
No, and it's one of the things that like bums me out about most like coming of age literature, like that we were talking about earlier, where it's like with Triceratops is adults. Like adults just don't see, but in that story, the father can see them too. Just like in this, the mother also has some latent telepathic ability that her son has. So it's really interesting to watch a parent and a child grow together, which I think is definitely a more natural depiction than parents just don't understand and children are magic.
Yeah, and I think if any story needed it, it's definitely the story of the two of them, because I think that's what they were both missing, I think, is why she didn't allow them to not let her have the child. And even with that, he was still not allowed to grow up with his mother. And both of them were forced to hear the squawkings of all of these bugs around them, basically making them go crazy. They both deserved that growth that they finally got from getting closer with each other.
Yeah, no, and I love it too, where it's like God forgive me, I'm gonna fucking bring up like Twilight now. But no, it's that bullshit that like Edward says with Bella, where it's like, you know, I could read everyone's thoughts, but I can't read yours. And it's like that weird, like refreshing thing that, like, I imagine if you had telepathy, it would be a fucking nightmare. I wouldn't want to hear like the deepest, most inner thoughts of every single person. I would just hate them all, which is what happens to our protagonist.
Right, and except for the one person you can find who gives you the silence or whose mind
exactly.
you mind listening to.
And it's like, no, exactly, and the only person he can hang out with who, like, and he tries to, like, probe, but it's like, I wonder if there was, like, a little aspect of, like, joy between him and his mother, because it's like, if he was around her, he didn't have to worry about hearing some bullshit.
Right, I mean, you know, like he said, eventually he came back to the curiosity of wanting to probe her again and figure out what it was that was lying beneath, but it seems like he visited her a lot, and that alone was really healing for both of them.
Yeah.
To be able to have that.
Which I like that, because I feel like, you know, I've been distant with parents at aspects of my life, and it's like that was a thing where like I could have learned that lesson a lot sooner.
Yeah, I mean, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but I mean, these stories both definitely teach you to open yourself to experiences new, whether they be ones that could hurt you or ones that could make you grow and change, or a combination of both of them. I think that's what both of them teaches you, is it's never too late to still be a child or to grow up, whatever place you're in, and to find those connections still.
So do you have any moments of premature enlightenment?
Moments of premature enlightenment. Quite a few, actually. I love the idea that this story keeps bouncing back and forth narratively, because it made me feel immersed in the world. And, you know, I feel like the real moment of shock and awe for me in this story was the psychic stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it just really added this extra thing of, like, illustrating the characters in the story whose minds were truly open, and the characters in the story who were bit players. Despite the damage that they were able to do, which was great, everyone who was not the two main characters, they really had no agency. As much damage as they could do, they really didn't have any roles. And I think that that's what's so great, is showing the other in this story, the aliens, had the most heart and insight. Especially considering it's a story written about humans and by a human, obviously. Mm-hmm. It really makes you think about, like, well, what is alien?
Yeah.
In our own culture and for our species.
Well, no, and actually, and this is a thing that reminded me of when we did the Savage Mouth, like this sort of pervasive misanthropy in the Savage Mouth is turned on the self, but I feel like in the Paper Spaceship it gets turned out, like.
Right. Well, exactly. In Savage Mouth, you have only one mind. Other than the people at the end of it, like the cops and stuff like that, that are sort of trying to stop spreading this madness. And in this story, what is there to be contained? You know what I mean? Like, everyone's minds are an open book to these two people. It's really interesting.
That's it. I feel like my biggest moment of, like, premature enlightenment in this story, it came from the moment where Osen said no. Actually, both times Osen said no.
Both times Osen said no.
Which, like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm a pro-choice dude. Like, I think that if you don't want to have a baby, you shouldn't have to. Like, it's your body, your choice.
Right.
Well, that being said, your body, your choice, and Osen decided to have her baby. And, like, despite the fact that people were pressuring her not to, she's like, no, you don't get to decide what I do with this.
No, and not only that, but if she had let them, she knew that they did not have her best interests at heart at all. It wouldn't have been... There was no choice other than her making the choice.
Yeah. And it's even more fucked up because it's like, you know, I guess she wasn't all there, but it's like, I wonder... Because, like, he has these moments with his mother where it's like, are you crazy or are you just playing crazy?
It's both.
It's
both. A little both. I don't think she can always control it, but she can sometimes.
Well, no, and it's like, and I also feel like we talked about this a while ago, where it's like that whole conversation we had of like whether or not Hamlet's crazy or Ophelia's crazy. It's like, I don't know, they seem to be acting very rationally given the things they've been through.
Yeah, given what's happened to them, what else would a rational mind do in that situation?
Yeah. So it's like, you know, oh, she's just so weird. She like wanders around naked singing songs, and it's like, yeah, she's been raped and traumatized. And like also everything else on top of that, and for years. And there's an aesthetic trope about that I think is interesting, is the, you know, the raped woman who refuses to put clothes on. Actually, no, I'm not. Or, you know, like the women are, it's like, oh, you can't be naked around the children, and it's like, go fuck yourself. Like their dad or husband or brother made her naked already and didn't bother to put clothes on her.
Right, as though those niceties are being observed for her in any way.
It's like, oh, well, I mean, if you were raped, you should at least cover it up. And Osen's entire presence like slaps that mentality in the face. Like it just won't let them forget.
Yeah.
Even though they try their best. Like they go on, it's like, oh, isn't that weird? That old mad woman.
Whatever she does that's weird or out of place, they're able to write it off for a little bit, but the few moves she makes of her own agency, they're not able to write off, and they have to live with those choices that she makes, regardless of how cogent she seemed to be when she was making. And it does really... This story is, in another sense, definitely about not being a victim. And given the circumstances, considering you could say she could very easily accept being a victim given her circumstances. She's a very strong character, both she and her son, and I'm not sure what to do with that information, especially considering the few times she's allowed to be given a choice. How strong she seems despite that.
Yeah. No, and it's and it's like it's the only 2 times we really see this woman committing murder, but then not even murder, like it's
kind of a consequence.
She made a suggestion.
Right.
She Kilgraved a couple of people into a suicide pond. No big.
She did Kilgrave them.
And you know what? Honestly, like it's gonna sound horrible, but it's like I don't really think she's fucking wrong to do that. Like the woman who's just like, oh, look at this poor mentally challenged girl who like our husbands like to rape. She gets drunk and you know what's fun? Let's dump her in a well in the middle of winter and laugh about it.
Right, and then getting more upset when she won't wear clothes. Like,
and I'm like, you know what? You can go take a fucking walk in a suicide pond, you asshole.
I'm surprised that when the soldier tried to come back to this town, there wasn't a fucking crater or just like water filled with skeletons.
Well, no, doesn't he say that like he can't go back? Like he can't.
He's compelled to go back by something that would be less, someplace more amenable. Mm-hmm. Like the thought is placed in his head. He's not given a choice to it, and it's like. The fact that that's the least of what she did, even in her condition, they should all consider themselves lucky she only Kilgrave 2 people.
Yeah. No, and that's a point that gets brought up, I believe, like where it's like there are only 2 people in this town from outside of town, so it's like where do all these people, they live here in some sort of weird retconned past, and they all have these really off, like,
the place where
rhymes.
The wolf gods are still worshipped by the older families.
Okay, you know what? I think I figured it out now. All right, so tell me if this is the way it is.
Okay.
So, an alien race comes to Japan, like way back in the day.
Yes.
They set up. Then they're telepathic. They have mind control abilities and telepathy. They pose as or genetically insert themselves into a local family.
Right.
That's the one who owns the house by that place. Something crazy happens that kills off the whole family, leaving one alive and in a paralyzed state. But like there's this weird like psychic bubble over the town that just doesn't let it like intermix with other people, and it kind of I guess drives them crazy because there's that line where it's like, well, I mean, I guess in rural Japan, like, you know, getting busy is just a thing you do, but these people like throw themselves into adultery with fucking abandon.
Right. It almost seems
it's like a weird Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right. Like maybe there is some sort of psychic residue of the whole thing that happened or the remnants of whatever was there that's still keeping things semi-automatic on what it's supposed to be like, but obviously there's no one at the wheel anymore.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like whatever it is, it's probably not being affected by Asen or her son. Like, I feel like they're stuck in it and need to escape it.
Right, and so maybe that's what the fog is, or what, when she finally clears her mind up and tells him what that is that he's feeling, maybe that is what this whole environment was protecting them from, or was keeping them away from to some degree.
Yeah.
Incredible story, huh? For such a short story, like.
Yeah.
I feel like even after all this, we've only barely scratched the surface.
Serious. No, and it's I still someday just want to like have a sit down and we'll just Winchester Boys style, just have like a road so far where we just do like a quick rundown of all of our stories. Speaking of which, one of the things that I thought was really awesome about the way that this story connects to a past one is, and I didn't know this, but he translated Heinlein.
That's right.
And this has a lot of very notable similarities to our episode, or to the story that we did on Heinlein, All You Zombies.
All You Zombies, that's right. You definitely have the sort of other and the time loop idea of like people stuck together, you know, child and parent. There's a lot of very similar themes running through it.
No, I would definitely say so, and it's also like the troubled relationship that comes between a mother and a child, especially like a single mother child that the government's trying to take away from you because you're poor and or insane and or transitioning into a man.
I mean, all of those things could be considered by the government the same thing, for being honest here. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any other related reading for this?
Sure. If you want to go back and listen to our Minority Report episode as well, there's actually a lot of interesting themes overlapping between those two stories as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have the in Minority Report's case, the murdered mother. At least when we're talking about the movie, is more what I mean. The murdered mother of the psychic kids, and having them be taken away and raised for the good of society around them. I think there's a lot of good parallels.
I think so too. Yeah, no, it's very that story is very but the needs of the many, and this poor addict woman can't possibly deal with a psychic child.
Right, and then by the end of the story, we have the poor psychic child actually be given some sort of consideration as to what they would want to have happen for them.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. She gets to be in a house with her other precog friends.
They get to read whatever they want in silence.
Oh my god, I freaked out so hard on the ending of that movie. I'm like, I could dick that.
I could too. It'd be a nice escape from some of the constant chattering everywhere.
It's a quick aside. It's an actual shame that we're a crazy amount of episodes into this podcast, because the way that I would recast it is the Precog podcast, where it's just we just get a third member to be Agatha, and we all pretend to be Precogs reading science fiction.
Right, but then only Agatha actually has the Minority Report.
Exactly, we're just rubbish. We get 90% of our stories' endings wrong.
Yep, I like that. I do have a few other things.
Yes.
Escape to Witch Mountain also has a lot of good parallels with this story as well, in that it has a space mountain that magic children are escaping to.
Yeah, they could be considered demonic or witches, but actually they're aliens.
Yeah, so a lot of good parallels there. Also, specifically the movie, if we're talking about things there. I don't know if is that based on a book?
I have no idea. I've only seen the movie, and I would highly recommend it just based on the movie.
The movie's great, and by the way, if you like the color purple, this movie's got it. A lot of it. So much. Yep.
There's actually, and this is the thing that's horrible, I remember being a kid watching that movie, and just as soon as they went to, the rich guy's house, and he showed them their playroom where they had, their own carousel and ice cream machines and all that shit, I'm a level with you. Me as a child, you could take me away from my parents and put me in that room. I'd just stay in that room. I'm not escaping Witch Mountain. I'm eating all the ice cream.
It's definitely tough. You're like, Witch Mountain, ice cream and awesomeness. Witch Mountain, ice cream and awesomeness. But, you and I don't have magic purple stuff compelling us to do things, so that's a whole nother story.
True.
This was mentioned in an analysis of the story we just read, but the person writing the analysis compared a lot of this sort of aliens landing in our past to Eric von Daniken's Chariot of the Gods, which more recently has kind of seen the light in sort of the Ancient Alien series on the History Channel and those sorts of things.
Also, definitely very heavily written into the fiction, or the backstory for the Prometheus.
Yeah, Prometheus, definitely.
Films.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Prometheus is it's very much along the same line, so that's actually a good recommend too as well.
Yeah.
I there's not as much about. I mean, we're just kind of spitballing this off the top of our heads, the psychic stuff, but there's definitely the ancient aliens visiting Earth and seeding humanity in the same way, perhaps, that happened in the Legend of the Paper Spaceship.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of other parallels I'm not thinking of now that we'll totally, as soon as we turn this off, we'll be like, oh, Space Jesus was totally, this person in the story.
No, it's definitely Sun Space Jesus.
Yep.
I would say for my recommends, I just read this and I really loved it. It was Joanna Russ's novella Souls, which is it's really good. It's about a boy and his ward, or he's the ward of this abbess in the Middle Ages. So it's this older woman who's a nun, and she's just supernaturally really good at talking to people. she's just like the most kind, patient, funny person you ever met. And then these Vikings invade, and the abbess like tries to reason with them, and through a bunch of different twists and turns, it gets revealed that the abbess is some kind of creature that is not from our reality. Like she's like from beyond, that she's some kind of alien, and like a lot of people attribute like her like clairvoyance to like a saintliness, but actually she's an alien character. And it's the thing that's tragic is this story and that one, and the one we just did. There are multiple moments where like this person who is just an alien posing as a human is giving you every fucking opportunity not to be an asshole. And then eventually someone just is an asshole too much, and the alien's like, you know what, fuck you. You're mind controlled now.
Yep.
Like, congratulations, you just bitched yourself out of your free will. And that's actually like, and I love that moment in this and in that one, but it's like it's a very intense moment of like I don't disagree with them. How fucked up do you have to be to have your free will revoked by another person? Like,
yeah, gotta push too far, too hard, too much, too long.
Yeah.
All of these characters have that in common. They're like, I've gone well and beyond patience that should go along with the understanding for this situation. No more. Mm-hmm. By free will. You lost your chance.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I do understand that if you could.
Oh yeah, I would carry all of those people in a heartbeat, just like electricity and pig blood flying everywhere.
No, and it's like, yeah, no, it's just, it really is the corporeal equivalent of, like, it's like if you have a friend who's just being a dick and they're super drunk and they're like, I'm gonna drive home, take their fucking keys away.
Yeah, you take their keys away, they're gonna be a little abusive. They'll probably thank you for it later, though.
So, yeah, I think that's my only recommend for that one. Can't think of any others. This story was very singular in its way.
And can I just add as a recommend, if you've listened to both these episodes, what are you doing if you haven't? They go really well side by side. I really enjoyed the experience that much more of reading one after the other, and I would recommend that the most out of anything. Maybe not necessarily, doesn't matter the order, mm-hmm. but Triceratops and the Legend of the Paper Spaceship they evoke very similar feelings.
They do. It's almost like perverse dark sides of one another. Like, just one of them is just incredibly optimistic, and the other.
They both show wonder.
They do, and they both do it very well.
They do, but they also show loss very well as well, and I do think they do it from opposite sides of the same coin.
Well, anything else?
I think we've covered it.
I think we have. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in the Mirror Zone. I have been Bryce Skidmore.
And I have been David Leskin.
And please don't be a dick to telepaths. It won't end well.
It will never end well.
Just don't.
Don't do it.
Don't do it, you guys. Okay, bye.
Bye.